Hello, everyone. My name is Julio. I am an economic anthropologist, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Circles UPI project. So the Circles UPI project is a basic income protocol that today runs on the Gnosis chain. And maybe just a bit of the backstory about why the politics of mathematics. I was once in a bar in Berlin with some lefty techie people, and one of them came up to me and we were talking about mathematics, and he had this idea that mathematics was somehow free of politics. And I was struck by this statement, and I said, of course not. Mathematics is full of politics. And so that led me to a lot of different discussions and workshops, and now I'm writing a second book on this. So I want to just tell you the backstory of why I came up with this idea and why is it important. So mathematics, or the way we relate to mathematics, the values that we embed in our mathematics carries consequences, political consequences, social consequences. So it's important that we understand them so that we can think about how to design them based on the values that we want to see in the world. So who knows, probably everyone knows the person on the left, but who knows the person on the right? Who can tell me who that is? Good, cool, good, great. So this is the best place to actually talk about this. Godel is his name. He was a mathematician, a logician that was friends with Einstein. He worked at the Princeton Institute of Advanced Studies right around the time of the Second World War. And he became famous mainly because of this thing that is called the Incompleteness theorem, which is very nicely inscribed in this idea that, or this statement that he wrote in mathematical formulas saying this statement cannot be proved. And so basically, just a bit of recap here. So proofs. What are proofs? In simple terms, we can think of proofs as logical arguments that demonstrate why a statement about numbers is true. And to do that, we need axioms. So the building blocks of proofs, if you want, which are undeniable statements about the numbers that are involved. What Godel did was that he translated mathematical statements and equations into code numbers. And this allowed him to basically allow numbers to talk about themselves. And that's how he created a statement that says that this statement cannot be proved. So in Godel's paradigm, statements can either be true or false, but if the statements are true, they can either be provable or non-provable. Now, what that means is that in any system, in any formal logical system or axiomatic system, you always have something that needs to exist outside the system for it to be verified. So one simple example to explain this is if you want to learn about biology, you need to know a bit of chemistry, right? You need a system at a higher level of emergence or a different level of emergence to understand it. To understand biology, you need chemistry. For chemistry, you need physics. And for physics, you need mathematics, right? So what Godel did in a way was basically shake the foundations of mathematics at the time. So he, by this very quote-unquote simple proof, he basically revolutionized mathematics forever, and their consequences haven't really been explored. This is around 1940s, even earlier, 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And so this idea of incompleteness basically says that in all systems, there are always statements within those systems that we cannot really prove. And so, deep breath, what happens when we accept that incompleteness is a fact in the systems that we build? What happens when we design systems thinking about them from the perspective of incompleteness? This is a question for you. And the second thing that Godel did that no one really knows about is that he was buddies with Einstein. They would walk together around the campus in Princeton all the time. And for Einstein's 70th birthday, what Godel did is that he basically resolved Einstein's theories of relativity and basically came up with his own model of the universe. Today, they call it the Godel metric or the Godel's rotating universe. And what it basically said was that he took the position that was actually quite radical, more than Einstein, saying, actually, time is not relative. It actually doesn't exist. So following that sense, if there is some sort of thing as a rotating universe, then time travel is possible, but only to the past. Of course, if you have a rocket to go that can travel all around the universe. And so the question that comes out for me is, what sort of politics does this worldview of a rotating universe bring into being? When we think about different mathematical systems or different paradigms in the history of the world, the mathematics that the societies have, in a way, shaped the technologies and the tools that they built. So this is a paper that tries to map out the way in which, a way to visualize this universe, but they called it a co-rotating cylindric polar coordinates. But I also think this can be useful for coordination. Now, what is Circles UBI? Circles UBI can be think about it. You can think about it as a protocol. First of all, a protocol that today lives on Gnosis chain, or previously XDAI, and it's basically an unconditional basic income system that people can use. What is basic income? Basic income is an unconditional amount of money that is given to all individuals on a periodic basis, without the need to prove your identity, your gender, your class, or your income. So it is just given. And so we're trying to do this in practice. We're not waiting for the state to do it. We're just saying, what happens if we make a protocol and we self-organize it? And so right now we're doing this in Berlin, where we have a pilot with around 700 people that use it in different ways. And these circles are accepted by around 30-something businesses at the moment. So there is a marketplace, you can check it out. I welcome you to make a wallet at the Circles Garden, circles.garden. And I'll get to the Web of Trust part in a second. That's the infrastructure that Circles is based on. But I think one thing that is important about Circles is that it is a unique type of money. It is what we call in anthropology a credit money system, as opposed to a commodity money system. If you're in the crypto space for a while, you might be used to having crypto tokens or digital assets, which are a form of commodity money. With Circles, you can actually settle payments and use it as you would use cash. So it's actually quite handy. So this is a picture of one of the community members at a marketplace that we have using the wallet. We also have farmers in the network from Brandenburg, which is this area that surrounds Berlin. So what we're trying to do as a strategy when we meet in the assemblies is to basically say, how could we create a circular economy where we can connect all the different parts of the supply chains in order to give people a basic income? So what happens when we center people as the center of the economy and not stuff, basically? And so this is what we do. And this is a picture of the Web of Trust. Now, I can do this right now because, as you know, blockchains leak metadata, so we can scrape the information using an API, and then try to get, through Gephi, a picture of what the trust network looks like. Now, what is a Web of Trust? A Web of Trust comes from the PGP paradigm, pretty good privacy. So it is basically a decentralized infrastructure for establishing the authenticity of the binding between public keys and generally trust relationships between people. So you might have tried to use PGP in your email and might have failed because it's pretty hard to use. Don't worry, Circles doesn't work like that. Actually, it's quite easy to use. The way that Circles works is that when you enter Circles, you need 3 people that are already within the network to trust you. And that was a parameter that we chose. And when you enter, you start to mint tokens at a constant rate as an income. So you get 1 every hour or 24 a day. And one important thing that makes Circles quite complex is that everyone issues their own personal ERC20 token and then make trust relationships with people. So what that means is that it's you could call it a currency pluriverse, in the sense that there is no one Circles. And so every time someone makes a trust relation, the whole topology of the network changes. So how do you route payments? There is this analogy that we use called the 6 degrees of separation, that basically says that if I want to pay, I don't know, the Dalai Lama for his services to humanity, I may know Chris, and Chris knows Awa, and Awa knows someone that eventually knows the Dalai Lama. And if there is a trust path, there is an algorithm that was developed by Chris Eth, the writer of Solidity, called the Pathfinder algorithm, that basically tries to calculate what is the shortest path from me to the Dalai Lama, and then sends a payment through. So on the back end, there is a lot of complexity going on where this Pathfinder is trying to look over the whole topology and then calculate as fast as possible the path. And sometimes if it takes too much time, the block changes and then the payment doesn't go through. So a lot of the problems that we have in the pilot is how can we make this type of transactions run more efficiently, right? And also, I mean, the fact that I can do this is because I also run the research for Circles, and we don't want this to happen. And so that's why I'm here today to a bit think together with you about how could we, I mean, we're now in the process of building what we call an anonymous web of trust as part of an Entropy project that we call. I don't have time to get into Shannon Entropy because of time, but I think the main idea here is how, if you have an anonymous setup, how can you route payments across a web of trust where people trust each other, but no one can know the eagle's eye view of the whole trust network, right? So that's one of the questions that we're trying to think through now with Sarah Friend, who is developing this. And then why is this important? Well, obviously, I don't have to tell you this. You know this. Today, there are no privacy-preserving solutions for general payment settlement of debt infrastructure. There is no alternative that is privacy-preserving to Visa, MasterCard, Google Pay, Apple Pay, and so on. And so the question is, if you have an anonymous web of trust, it is not really just UPI that you can build many other applications, chats, social media, and many other types of payment and credit networks. And of course, this is in the context of the war on cash. There is a big push to get rid of cash, which is the bicycle of payments, which we at Circle support, but we think it's important to have a digital alternative. There's also the question of CBDCs. So for example, today the people at NIM went to Ethiopia to talk to the UN Internet Governance about the necessity to involve people in the Global South about CBDCs, because no one's really talking about CBDCs in other places. So we think there is a third way, and that's people-powered money. So in the sense of Circles, everyone issues their own money, and then they can relate and transfer it to each other. And the other solutions, and please look at the picture, are quite dystopian. So there is a UBI protocol coming from Silicon Valley called WorldCoin that scans people's retinas as a way to do verification. We don't really like this. We think people should verify other people and not have an orb that hashes your eyebrow and your eyelid, and yeah, you get the point. So how does anonymity add value to trust networks? This, we narrow it down into two things that we call a transitive trust spectrum and an anonymous trustfulness. So a transitive trust spectrum just basically says that, in an AWOT setting, people, it basically enables people to have anonymous distributed trusted moderation between different groups and applications. So I already mentioned them: social media, chats, payments, and so on. And also anonymous trustfulness. So how could you create a system that is fully anonymous, but you can still fully trust the people in the network? And so, of course, the aim of the system is to let users perform transactions on the blockchain while anonymizing personally identifiable information about the user. So those two things would just be the identity of the person and their trust connections. So that's kind of like the basis to think about this. And yeah, the scenario that we're thinking about is, there is an owner of a wallet that signs a transaction, and then the application encrypts the transaction, obfuscating the owner's real or pseudo-anonymous identity, and then it successfully publishes the transaction on the chain with the obfuscated metadata. And so we're working on this now, and one of the first primitives that we want to build on it, it's something that I called Perishable Shares. And this is a bit about maybe the politics of zero, or the politics of emptiness, if you want. Here I use the concept of Enzo, which is a Buddhist Zen concept to mean a hand-drawn circle that is basically drawn in one or two strokes to signify impermanence, or the fact of reality that everything is constantly changing all the time. And so perishable shares are a way to think epistemically about organizations and say, what if we want to make an organization that only lives for 10 years, and we issue shares for that amount of time, as opposed to perpetual shares that last forever and can be basically accumulated by a specific few individuals. And so the idea of building a perishable shares as a first primitive enables us to basically think about organizations differently. So the different parameters that perishable shares have are, for example, the number of shares that can be emitted per cycle, the intervals between the issuance shares of the shares, the number of cycles, the lifespan of the shares, and the total shares issued. So for example, say you have a treasury that you made with your organization, and at the end of the life of the shares, whatever you have on the treasury can be distributed back to the people within the web of trust based on the trust relations embedded within that. And so you can define a perishable share as a new asset class, which provides investors with access to equity for a limited amount of time. And of course, these assets can only be liquidated or counter-traded by investors while the shares are alive, and after they expire, any claims of ownership, dividend equity, ceases to exist. And so this is one of the first things that we're building now for probably Q2 next year. And we are now in the process of making the technical specs. And so thinking about them together, the AWOT, or Entropy as we call it, integrates with the ENSOs by allowing people to basically issue them out and have forms of anonymous governance. So we were just talking about it previously in the break, that when we talk about anonymity and governance, there are many spaces that haven't really been explored. So for example, what are you anonymizing and who are you anonymizing? So maybe you want the votes to be totally anonymous, but you want to know who is part of your council or your assembly and so on. So there are many ways and in which the perishable shares can be used. I initially thought about them for land commoning, so as a way to get investors to buy land and then have a limit to how much they can own the land, so the stewards can eventually have it. For platform cooperatives, anything from housing co-ops, and of course infrastructure providers, which is what we're doing with Circles. And maybe, just to finish, we are at the moment hiring. This is my team, the Circles Cooperative and the Bits Possess team. The Bits Possess Collective is the collective founded by Sarah Friend and Andreas Cialoja that currently maintains the Circles infrastructure. And now we're expanding a bit our operations to have more applications that we can run on different chains. So please reach out if you are interested, and we can talk more about it. And yeah, I end it always with this. Even communities need breaks sometimes. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Julio. With that,